But first we'll start with the report back, and since we're slowly making our way to the podium. Yes, let us start with Gemma.
Thanks very much. I want to thank all the participants in my breakout group for offering some really very interesting insights from their experiences. Also, the presentations earlier, I think, really helped to give us a very good basis for discussion. So just to really give a quick tour of our discussions, Question one, in terms of experiences in the process of identification and assessment of finance needs and what you could do to further improve that process. I think one important aspect that was highlighted was the need to link the needs assessment to national development strategies, even to use that as your starting point. Secondly, a cross-governmental approach was seen as very important. Sometimes the involvement of ministries that had convening power, like the financial or planning ministries, was also seen as important. Stakeholder engagement, both within government and also with the public, with the private sector, with all your relevant stakeholders, was also a key part of the process. A lot of the examples that we heard from had, let's say, had learned lessons and had benefited from regional cooperation and support, international support from the funds, from UNEP, UNDP, was also very important. The definitions of climate finance was seen to be important in developing your management processes. And then another aspect, let's say, that requires further thought from the morning's presentations was, and this idea that Jeff having its portfolio prioritization approach and the knowledge that the GCF also has a portfolio approach, what you could do to think about more coherence and coordination between those two processes. Our discussion on question 2 developed into a discussion of question 3, basically looking at, what are the actions that are required to accelerate the translation of finance needs into projects and programs, and what are countries' respective support needs. One thing that was seen as important was the need for project development to be led by local experts. Local experts needed the international support. And so in keeping the leadership and the actual development with the local experts, that would lead to more durable national capacity. The point was emphasised that there is no one-size-fits-all approach. Country capacities differ, and we can't be making too many assumptions about what is going to work in specific country contexts. There was a feeling that, let's say, the NDCs were produced to quite a tight timeline, and even though there were estimates of the financial support required associated with those NDCs, that maybe further understanding of this would be useful. And there was also some thought that the development of the transparency framework and that reporting could be very helpful in that regard. There's support to, it was emphasized as well as, project development, that you also need support to overcome implementation challenges, such as building capacity in project management and financial management. Also, the thought that developing direct access and using direct access can help to build that capacity. And I guess when you have project management and financial management capacity, it also will lead to, I guess, better ability for the project development side as well. So yes, direct access can help secure domestic capacity. And then finally, one important point was that a lot of the examples we spoke about were the assessment of mitigation needs. And, I think we saw the marginal abatement cost curve, which is really important for mitigation. But of course, looking at adaptation needs is a very different process. Thanks.
Thank you, Gemma. And now we'll ask Guti if you could please report back. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and apologies for getting here a bit late, but we had a very very rich and active discussion, and I already want to really thank all the members in the group for the discussion, and apologize for this appalling report back, because it was quite challenging then to do it in a very short time. So I think the first thing that was really brought up and very much emphasized was the need to identify priorities, and also, but at the same time then to keep the bigger picture in mind and to keep the range of opportunities open, even, and so that once you identify the priorities, then you can get to the activity level. There was a lot of emphasis on the need to look at the whole of government approach and make sure that all the ministries and relevant departments are involved in the discussions, and the importance of really reaching out to the ministries of finance was highlighted. The issue of institutional enabling environment that Mariama brought up at the opening address this morning was also discussed in the group. It all then comes down to capacity building and being able to retain capacity in the countries. It was there was the issue of making sure that we have a planning and a coherent time frame, so that it flows smoothly from planning to implementation with the agreed time frame was also brought up. And that on capacity building, it was really that the focus should be on building institutional capacity rather than relying on consultants or individuals. There was also a discussion on the need to really look at the relevant climate change items in all areas of budget, not just those managed by the Ministry for Environment, and to make sure that we then connect all the relevant actors. An MRV system clearly is needed to track progress, and that then there should be a clear signals on this on the priorities and programs and projects should come through the NDCs, NAPs, and so on, so that we have already a lot of the tools in place. On the definition of climate finance, there was the issue of basically having a top-down definition versus bottom-up, and I think the wisdom there is that we kind of agree to disagree, that there is no that at least at the moment it's not possible to do. I mean, we can have an operational definition of climate finance, but we would not be, that there is no one definition that we could use throughout the process. On priorities, while obviously in setting priorities, they're often top down, but at the same time, there was a lot of discussion also on the need to have this sort of bottom up community-led projects and make sure that there is this sufficient stakeholder engagement throughout the process. It was some mention of the need to make sure that climate change is indeed integrated in the long-term development plans and in national development plans. The lack of baseline data was brought up, and if I could then just have the next slide, please, Julian. Thank you. Yes. Then when the discussion on how do you get from theory to practice, so case studies and pilots were suggested. That pilot projects are important also, just to make sure that we get the private sector involved, and that sort of helps with the reference cases. There needs to be a tolerance for risk, because that's that kind of also goes through the system. Stakeholder input I already mentioned, but there's very clear evidence that for projects that stakeholders are involved, that they tend to be a lot more successful than the ones which are kind of just come down to the local communities without proper stakeholder engagement. The shift to programmatic approach is obviously very important, but it also needs to have an investment approach, which then has clearly identified costing for different options for investment. I guess I mean, if you really sort of have to summarize in 3 words, I think it would be sort of the institutional capacity and get the capacity building through that. It would be the need for ownership, and then it would be the stakeholder involvement. So thank you. And I apologize for the poor reporting back, but there are some of the members in the group took very, very detailed notes, and the Secretariat will have those. Thank you.
Thank you, Udi. I think you did just well. Said?
Thank you. Mindful of the time, we kind of compressed the 3 questions together, and I may not be able to do justice to the richness of the discussion we had, but I'm trying to convey what the essence of what was discussed, and as Udi mentioned, I mean, members of the breakout group can elaborate further later on in the question answers. But essentially, I mean, the whole idea was that how do you translate because the starting point for most the developing countries is that vulnerabilities, and how do you translate that into the needs and therefore the kind of support that you require. And one of the things, I mean, taking on from what Mariama mentioned, there are already various vehicles. You have the NAPAs, you have the NDCs, and those other instruments that can actually capture some of the requirements or the needs of the developing countries. But the point that was made was that there is different degree of granularities by the various NDCs. Some are much longer documents, which a lot of details, which is useful, but others are much shorter, maybe within 5-6 pages compared to 45 pages in some cases. And therefore, the challenge is how to translate those into more helpful for partners to be able to make appreciate the need for the support that can be given to those projects. So one of the suggestions, in fact, is a common practice in the Pacific Islands. They have 14 islands there, and they actually have a national climate finance assessments. And this was very helpful because partners found that it's sort of a template that captures and it allows partners to look across the region, some of the same issues, and therefore they make a better judgment in terms of providing support to particular countries in the Pacific. And in the case of, there's also the, under the UNDP, you have a development finance assessment. This also is a useful tool. And the suggestion for the group is that maybe you can institutionalize this so that it's rather, for one, maybe more regional groups could also use the same kind of formatting, and therefore it helps partners make informed assessments. And at the same time, it also, if you can institutionalize the system such that rather than on a case-by-case, it becomes a longer-term and sustainable sort of a platform for which partners can draw upon. And this can be developed in consultation and coordination with partners. For instance, some partners may prioritize certain aspects like gender, and therefore there'll be fields to respond to those requirements, and therefore it helps partners to make informed decisions. One of the challenges, one of the common needs challenges that came up was on adaptation, because I think what came out was that it was very difficult to entice private sector involvement or investment in adaptation. There was no ready answers, and I think this is something that we have to discuss further. And I think in the afternoon session, there will also be some discussion to that effect. One suggestion was that maybe in terms of private sector engagement, rather than individual entities, you could actually have you engage a consortium, maybe an association of hotels or businesses or something like that. So it's a wider target audience, so to speak, and therefore you may be able to reach out and get a more positive response in that respect. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Syed. Orlando.
Thank you, Ambassador. I was very happy with my group. There was a very open dialogue, and there was a balance of opinions between NGOs, developers, and developing countries. So it was very open and frank dialogue. And because of the time constraint, we decided to address all the three questions as a whole. But one of the key issues that we discussed was the importance of identify and prioritize the needs of the countries. Somebody raised the point that, okay, those needs have to be clear on what is for mitigation and what is for adaptation, because that was important to estimate the cost, to put a value on the needs and how much will they need to be financed. Also, some of the countries, the donor countries, said we need to really know how to understand your NDCs. For us, it's very important to understand what are you trying to say to us. So we think that this is important, and among different the participants, they raised the point that it is important to coordinate the dialogue in the country, especially among different institutions that have to do with climate change initiative. So, and that will take us at the end to action needed that we'll talk later on. And it's important with the same thing of leadership is how to integrate all those local strategies in one national plan. It's important to say what the private sector needs and what the public sector needs. So once all those needs are identified, so it will be more easy to come with a figure of financing. Also, we talk about the importance of to having an information system and how this information system had to be integrated to the national development plans. So once you have this full dialogue between where the country moves, where the country is moving, and the mitigation effort has to be aligned with that futuristic look of the country. So what we need to move ahead. It's important, as I was saying, to establish what has to be done by private and public sector and to identify the gap between them. And for example, some of our colleagues mentioned as a good example the Colombian climate finance strategy. As I understood, doesn't be close related it's not related to climate change, but it's a good example of how to address the financing needs is the Philippine National Action Plan of Biodiversity. Some of the group point that as a good example or a good exercise that is important to look at. Also, now one big issue was the importance of leadership at the national level. We need a champion, and this champion had to really help us to coordinate and align the policies so that can facilitate the dialogue and decide where to go or where the country needs to go, the country needs the funds to go. And there is that we agree with, I think, Group 2 and Group 3, is the case-based approach, going from the policies toward the finance, going from the micro to the macro, or the bottom-up approach. I think that is very important. And also, we need to align donors. It's important to align and coordinate donors, and also cluster agencies to have a common roadmap toward the needs of the country. And finally, it's important to use the fund for financial capacity building, and the most important in the capacity building is the issue of retention.
Thank you very much. I think we've had a very rich discussion with very useful inputs. I'd like to offer you the opportunity to ask any further questions or make any further contributions. Mindful that we have limited time, I would ask you to keep your interventions brief if you so desire. So the floor is open for any further comments or questions. Timor-Leste, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Ambassador, and thanks for all presenters. My point is quite out of the box. My point is when we are discussing about long-term finance, we can also discuss about long-term finance for loss and damage. I really don't see the key elements that we are discussing now with regard to loss and damage financial support. So for long run, I think we need to integrate this issue very carefully. But I also would like to share some national financial mechanisms in place, like Bangladesh, they established their own national finance mechanism for climate change. So I could also consider this as the case that they have in the Philippines or in Colombia. I think those are two issues that I need to raise. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Timor-Leste, and also for asking the question, how do we integrate the question of long-term finance for loss and damage? Do I have any other requests for the floor? We had one question that we wanted to put to the facilitators of the breakout group and to the wider group, and that was with respect